in the days of slavery...
The analogies are not exact. How do I shut this off?
Would we say the same thing with slave? Because you were making an analogy between animals and slaves.
I was making an analogy between the use of humans as resources and the use of non-humans as resources. There are certain... Let me give you an analogy which I hope will make it clear. Let's assume we genetically engineered humans, because we are going to be in a situation, if we're not already, if we don't have the ability already, to genetically engineer humans into existence who don't have families. We can grow them in dishes and whatever, and they are mentally disabled. They have the mental ability of a 2-year-old. So they are, as I mentioned this morning, like George Bush. Okay, and so they are mentally disabled, but they're physically able to do work. Now, let's assume that we do this because we want to. Thank you very much. We want to do this so that we can genetically engineer these beings into existence, so that we can get them to do dangerous work that we don't want to do. We don't want normal people to do. And then it dawns on us that this is a bad thing for us to do. Would you not think that stopping these engineered, disabled humans whom we've created to do these work projects, would you not think that it would be perfectly fine to stop them from reproducing because we shouldn't have had them in existence in the first place? Because if you get to a point where you say, God, we've done something monstrously immoral, but now we're committed to permitting it and to perpetuating it, that can't be right. So, in my judgment, look, I've got 6 I have 6 dogs, right? They are all spayed, they are all neutered. I mean, it would be crazy. There should never be another dog brought into existence, or a cat brought into existence, or a guinea pig brought into existence, or a hamster No, it should stop. It was wrong to begin with. And this idea that animals have rights of reproduction, this is a complicated issue. I mean, it's like, do they have an interest in... I don't think they have a right. I don't think they have any interest in reproducing. I think they have an interest in sexual contact. That's true. They have an interest in sexual contact. But I don't think they have an interest in reproducing. As a matter of fact, I think the situations under which domesticated animals reproduce is really tragic for them, because they can't... domestication is really horrible because they're caught in this netherworld of vulnerability. They're not animals and they're not humans. It's like, I love my dogs, man, but, they are dependent on me for everything. When they eat, when they drink, when they go out to pee, everything, every aspect of their lives, they are dependent on me for. And as much as I love them, and as much as I try to give them a great life, their life is in many ways tragic. And so the idea that we would perpetuate this is, to me, crazy. So when you say, well, they have an interest in sexual contact, so do kids, and we don't allow that either, because it's...
We don't neuter the kids.
Well, true, we don't. But you can't say that for all purposes, humans and I've never made this. It would be crazy to say humans and non-humans. I mean, when we talk about rights, we don't talk about giving dogs the right to vote or the right to drive. Or we'd probably have better political results if we did. But we don't talk about giving dogs the right to vote or the right to drive cars or the right to, because it would be crazy to do so. And I think once we start talking about, say, well, they have rights of reproduction, and we have to perpetuate domestication, even though, when we think about it, the whole notion of domestication is fundamentally wrong. We shouldn't be we should not have dogs, we shouldn't have cats, we shouldn't have hamsters, guinea pigs. We should adopt all of the animals that are presently in existence. We owe it to them. They're in this mess because of our stupidity, because of our arrogance and our selfishness. We have an obligation to take care of the ones here now, but we also have an obligation to stop bringing them into existence. Okay? All right, yes, your name is?
It's Theo.
Theo.
Regarding that letter by interesting the Whole Foods, that was in 2005.
Yes.
I just wanted to know, I'm sure you know that PETA has filed a lawsuit against Whole Foods.
So what? PETA has not retracted. Look, one of the things that these organizations are very good at doing.
Repeat the question.
Her question is, the letter that I posted this morning, that I put on the board, it was a 2005 letter from Peter Singer to Whole Foods. And it was expressing their appreciation and support, Peter Singer's appreciation and support for the Whole Foods Happy Exploitation Program, and it was signed by it was on behalf of a number of organizations, including PETA. And Theo asked the question, he said, are you aware that PETA has filed a lawsuit claiming that Whole Foods is misleading people with their happy exploitation standards? And my response to Theo is, Theo, this is what these organizations do. They talk out of all sides of their fundraising mouths. So Ingrid, and look, I know Ingrid very well. I was once deeply involved with PETA, actually until the early 90s, but I was with them in the beginning. And I like Ingrid in many ways, but Ingrid will go on and she'll do a YouTube thing saying, we don't promote happy exploitation, and we think happy exploitation is a bad idea, yet PETA gives awards to Temple Grandin. What does it mean when you give an award to Temple Grandin? You can't say you don't promote happy exploitation when you're saying the person who designs happy slaughterhouses should be getting an award as a visionary. PETA gave her an award as a visionary. So the fact that PETA brought a lawsuit against Whole Foods, to me, doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference, because last week they brought a lawsuit against Whole Foods, and next week they'll be praising Burger King for having a non-vegan vegetarian product, or it might be vegan except it's fried in the same oil, but you don't want to be a purist. Don't be too judgmental. Go easy on yourself, and that sort of thing. That's the problem. Is these groups want to remember something, Theo. These groups are all catering to different constituencies. So, PETA wants to have something to say to the people who say, I want to be abolitionists and I want PETA to be abolitionists. So PETA wants to say, well, here's Ingrid's YouTube video saying that, that they don't approve of happy meat, and here's the lawsuit that we filed. And then somebody else comes and says, well, I really, I'm sort of a vegetarian, but I'm certainly not going to go vegan, not yet, and blah, 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 blah. And you say, oh, fine, we don't think that you should. As a matter of fact, we think that you should go and go to Whole Foods and buy their happy meat, etc. So they say different things to different groups. This is the problem. We need a consistent message, and the consistent message ought to be veganism. This is really not complicated. And the idea that you have organizations promoting these things. And you know what? I'd have more respect if PETA publicly retracted that 2005 letter, as far as I'm concerned, historically, was a disaster, because what it was the inauguration of the happy exploitation movement. It was basically a statement by the father of the animal rights movement, signed by all of the major U.S. groups, and Viva, when Viva had its U.S. arm, but it was signed by all of the major animal organizations in the United States, basically saying, we embrace the animal compassionate standards. As far as I'm concerned, that was the beginning of the end in terms of the animal movement. That was a devastating, and it was intended to be public. As a matter of fact, it was on the Whole Foods website for like 2 years. And when Peter was interviewed about it, and the person who interviewed him said, you're aware that Whole Foods is using that letter to promote happy meat. And Singer said, well, we didn't expect him to put it in the filing cabinet. I didn't expect John to put it in the filing cabinet. We sent it to him to use. So I think this is really, really problematic. And the fact that, if PETA really were serious about this, they would stop giving awards to Whole Foods. They would stop giving awards to people like Temple Grandin. They would stop telling people, go to McDonald's and eat the non-vegan burger that is fried in the same fat, on the same grill or fried in the same oil as the animal products are, with the bun that's got milk in it, etc. They would stop encouraging people to do that sort of stuff. They would publicly withdraw their support of that. They don't. They haven't. As a matter of fact, I was at a conference in March, and there was a PETA person there, and I gave a talk similar to the one I gave. So it was different, but it was similar to the one I gave this morning. And there was a PETA representative there, and she was saying, well, but we are critical of Whole Foods. It was before they filed a lawsuit. And I said, have you retracted have you publicly stated that you withdraw your support of that? And she said, but I said, have you publicly? No, we haven't. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care what they do. They need to take a consistent position. All these groups need to take a consistent position. It's too easy for people to get confused, and the message should not be confusing. The message should be simple. If animals matter, you can't eat them, can't wear them, can't use them. End of story. No rocket science, no complication, nothing more complicated required than that. If they matter, if you ain't vegan, you're an animal exploiter. That's it. That's it. That's the only thing that's the only message we need to be communicating. Yes. What's your name? Stephen.
I know you're very against single issue campaigns, and I completely understand why, but don't they have a use in acting as a kind of a reference point? Because if you agree that foie gras is a monstrosity, then surely it's only a little leap to say, well, eating chicken is a monstrosity.
But it doesn't seem, I understand that way, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your comment. It doesn't work that way, though, because the campaign is basically saying foie gras is bad, and it's more morally acceptable to eat these other products. So what you are saying is that I'm going to stop eating foie gras, and then I'm going to start agreeing that it's morally unacceptable to eat these other products. And I think that's unrealistic. I don't think it works that way. And I think if you look at the history of single issue campaigns, you'd be hard pressed to find one where you saw, if that were true, you would see some sort of pattern. We've had single issue campaigns for a long time now. I mean, these are not new. And so we've had these campaigns for a long time now. And they haven't really significantly changed anything. I mean, the perfect example is the fur campaign. The fur campaign has been a hideous failure. Look at these other campaigns. I don't care which one you take. Because that's always the argument. The argument for single issue campaigns is that they're gateway things. That people, it brings people in and then it changes them. And the answer is, okay, where are they? I haven't found. I don't see these changed people.
Is there something that the grassroots movement can do? You can kind of piggyback on the back of it. There was a lot of uproar here a few months ago about the Chinese dog festival.
Yes, I know.
On Facebook, and a lot of people said, yeah, but if you're disgusted by that, surely you're disgusted by slaughterhouses. So start to kind of question. So don't leave the campaigns do whatever they do, and then the grassroots movement kind of dive in.
Well, the problem is that the grassroots movement doesn't have the same ability to get that message out as the large groups who have multi-billion-dollar budgets, right? So if they're I think that those dog things, the dog meat things, I think they're horribly racist. I mean, they're really racist. I mean, I don't know if you were paying attention to those campaigns. The Asians were like, they're barbaric people. We're good people. We eat chicken and cow. They eat dogs. They're bad people. And I thought that was a really problematic campaign, and it really does convey the idea that eating steak and eating chicken and eating fish is morally acceptable, whereas eating dogs isn't. Now you can say, well, but can't we come in and say, I do that sort of thing, but I don't do it. As a matter of fact, and I get crap for it. I mean, when we had Cecil the lion, right? Cecil the lion, everybody was like all upset about Cecil the lion. I said, okay, he had a name. Whoa, that's important. Was it bad that the guy, that the dentist from Minnesota, wherever he was from, that he killed Cecil the lion? Yes. But so I wrote this. As a matter of fact, I did a few television things. I did a few essays, a few newspaper essays about how we should be upset about Cecil the lion. But if you're upset about Cecil the lion, you should be vegan. And what happened? Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd wrote this essay in which he said, these purists who have to tell everybody that they got to be vegan is problematic. To which I responded by saying, well, yes, but if you think that whales matter more than chickens, which he does, then that doesn't surprise me that you fetishize whales. I don't. I do piggyback on those things. But I don't do them as single issue. A single issue campaign is, by the way I'm using that expression, A single issue campaign is when you focus on some animal product or some animal, they're generally products. Not always, but they're generally products. You focus on a particular product and you say this is a bad product, and the message that is conveyed is the consumption of products other than this one is morally acceptable and makes you a better person. That's the problem. So when we have an anti-fur campaign, what we're saying is, fur is bad, but if you don't wear fur, it's better. It's more morally acceptable. I mean, I remember, when I used to do law stuff, when I used to do legal work, I would go represent people at fur demos. And, activists at fur demos, 95% of them, if not more, were wearing wool, they were wearing leather, and they're busy, calling women obscene names who are walking by with fur coats. And I said, enough of this, I ain't doing that anymore. And I stopped doing it. I stopped representing people at fur demos because animal rights people at fur demos were out of control. They basically would the sexist stuff that would come out of their mouths was horrifying. But they're all wearing, wool and leather. And there's no difference, it's like I have to hear about, Stella McCartney. This is that drives me crazy. The McCartney family you got Paul McCartney. The most amount of hate mail I got, and I get a lot, believe me. I mean, you want to see. Actually, I was actually thinking of doing sort of a YouTube video where I sit and read some of the things that people say to me. It's really, it's remarkable. It's just people get.
Name and shame.
I'm sorry, what? What?
Name and shame them.
Yeah. No, I mean it's okay. I mean some of them are funny, but people got the thing that people got most upset about was about 2 years ago. There was a McCartney poster at Thanksgiving time, and it was about not eating turkey and stuff. And I wrote a comment and I said, this guy is a vegetarian. He consumes animal products. He makes money. I mean, the whole Linda McCartney line, is got dairy in it and stuff, animal products. And I don't know what his relationship with that is, but he has profited from that. And I thought that this was just really outrageous. And I got thousands of nasty emails about, what are you, perfect? I said, no, I'm not perfect, but I am a vegan. And this idea that, but Stella McCartney, she's supposedly a vegan, but she's selling wool. She's selling products made of wool. And then somebody said, well, but they're humanely I got news for you. I don't know how much land she has in Surrey or Sussex or wherever she has her. She does not have enough land to produce enough wool that is supposedly humane. But so I don't know where that wool's coming from. But wool is exploitative. I don't care where it's coming from. Wool is exploitative. We should not be promoting people wearing wool, but that's what an anti-fur campaign does. And so when people talk to me about fur, I'll piggyback off of it, to use a speciesist expression. I will use that. If somebody says to me, I think fur is terrible, I always say to them, but you're wearing wool. Do you know about mulesing? Do you know about how wool is produced? But they don't kill the sheep. Of course they kill the sheep. I mean, they cycle the sheep, but at some point, on the last time they shave that sheep goes off to the slaughterhouse. So there is death involved, there is suffering involved, there is exploitation involved. Look, I think we've got to get to the point where we recognize this as a fundamental issue of justice. And if it's a fundamental issue of justice, we're no longer talking about treatment, we're talking about use. And like one of the questions I get all the time is, I have chickens, I eat, I treat the chickens really well, and I eat the eggs. And I say, look, I don't really care how well you treat the chickens. I don't care if the chickens live in a 12-room mansion. I just don't care. We have no business having these animals and using them as sources of food. We have got to stop that exploitation. I don't care how humane the exploitation is. Obviously, less suffering is better than more suffering. If you're going to own slaves, you ought to treat the slaves well, but slavery is wrong. And I think we just need to be sort of clear on that, because the problem is that we tend to, because we are all coming from a welfarist background, because that's the tradition of animal ethics in the Anglo-American world. It is animal welfare. We were all animal welfarists. Some of us still are. Many of us still are. But that's the tradition we got. That's the British tradition, which gave us animal ethics 200 years ago and also gave us modern animal ethics in the 1960s is very welfarist. And it's very focused on this idea that if you treat animals properly, their use does not raise fundamental moral questions. I think that's wrong. I think that's absolutely wrong. Anyway, let me get, sir, what's your name?
My name's Thor.
Thor.
Okay, just a bit of background. I was on the front line of what you would call a single issue campaign in Thailand for the past 12 years. I'd just come out after a year, and a month and a half ago I just came out of jail from Thailand, which is one of the least pleasant places. But what I find it difficult to understand is we've probably released thousands of dogs from being tortured to death, and those dogs have been homed. But this, you think, is pointless because it's single issue. You'll probably accuse me of being a racist as well because those dogs were destined for tables in Vietnam. I can't understand why you seem to put the human need of not having somebody shout a nasty name at them far beyond the need of an animal not to be tortured to death for food. Or just put this off to some pie-in-the-sky future when we all live in a post-capitalist wonder society, which isn't going to happen.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question, Thor. I think it's wrong to say that the people in Thailand or the people in China or the people in Korea are doing anything that is different from what we do here.
We weren't doing that. We were Thai people. We're mostly Thai people who were actually taking part in the action.
Your question was, why did I put calling people a nasty name? So I assume what you're saying, the way I interpreted that, please excuse me if I'm wrong and correct me, but I thought what you were saying was that I'm saying that we shouldn't be making racist statements about the Asians, and that you're saying that I'm putting
No, that's fair enough. It's nothing like the same.
What do you mean it's nothing like the same?
Okay, I'm Jewish. If you want to attack Jews for Shakita, a particularly unpleasant way of killing animals, be my guest. Be my guest.
I don't think Shakita is any worse than it. I actually don't think that halal or kashrut are any worse than stun slaughter. I really don't. I've been in kosher slaughterhouses. I have not been in halal slaughterhouses, but I have been in kosher slaughterhouses, and they are horrible. And they are, as far as I'm concerned, they're every bit as horrible as places where they're stunned. I mean, or supposedly stunned, because 80% of the time they're not completely unconscious when they're shackled, hoisted, and cut. But the point is, we're not going to ever see any real change. I mean, if what we're doing, if what this is all about, man, is that we're getting people turned off to the idea of eating dogs, while those people are saying, go Thorpe, go Thorpe, go Thorpe, eating their hamburgers, what progress are we making? I think, Thorpe, we have to, it's not a pie in the sky idea to say we can change the world. I gave you the numbers. If there's 150,000 of us, in 10 years, we could have 76 million vegans in the United Kingdom. If everybody just convinces one other person every year. So all I'm saying is, if we live in a world of limited time, limited resources. So why don't we focus on changing the paradigm, shifting the paradigm away from animal exploitation entirely? Because people in Britain are going to have no problem saying, oh yeah, those goddamn Asian people ought not to be eating dogs. Why? Because we fetishize dogs. I mean, people in this culture fetishize dogs. People in America fetishize dogs, fetishize cats. So what we end up doing is focusing on animals who are fetishized to the exclusion of the zillions of animals. I mean, I really don't know how many dogs the Asians eat, but you know what? My guess is it's a small fraction.
No, it's small, but it's very expensive.
Right, it's a small fraction of the number of animals that we kill. The number of chickens, I mean, God, it's mind-boggling, the number of chickens. And I don't know if any of you have ever been in a chicken slaughterhouse. I mean, all slaughterhouses are hideous, but chicken slaughterhouses they're horrible, horrible places. And they have I've seen these multi-story things where they have these rotating conveyor belts, and they what they do is they take the birds and they stick them in, they stick their feet in these cliffs, and then the birds go. They go through an electrified bath which is supposed to stun them, but it often doesn't. Many times doesn't. And then they go through a blade. The blade's all set. The blade's supposed to, they're supposed to chop their heads off or cut their throats or whatever. But because they're all struggling and they're all different sizes and stuff, sometimes it just gets the top of their head. And so, oftentimes they're not killed. Then they go into a scalding tank to get their feathers off. And I was at a place some years ago where it's hard to, because so many birds are coming by, you can't really get an accurate number. But I would say 40% of the birds I was seeing going into the hot bath were alive. And it is mind-boggling. And I don't really care. It's like, do I think people should be eating dogs? And the answer is, of course not. But what troubles me is that sort of campaign has people who are eating chickens saying, those goddamn Thai people, or those goddamn Chinese, or those goddamn Koreans, and that bothers me.
Yeah, but we're about rescuing individual dogs who are individual lives that experience individually, not a broad, we are liberating all dogs in the world. There are thousands of dogs, many of whom are alive right now.
I have no problem. Look, if you want to go save dogs as part of a vegan effort, go ahead and save dogs as part of a vegan effort. The problem is that these campaigns are basically never, ever, ever explicitly vegan. Number one. Number two, how about saving some chickens? It's like, I realize they're not as much fun as to hang around with dogs, but,
we've done that too.
All right. Yes, what's your name?
Leah.
Leah.
I'm a vegan and also a French feminist advocate.
Good.
And I find that in my work, both the vegan movement and the feminist movement are strengthening my work. And I wonder if you can imagine a common grassroots movement between all those different social justice issues. And I'd be interested to know your views on those different social justice movements intersecting and strengthening each other.
Anna and I have taught a course for many years at Rutgers University called Human Rights and Animal Rights. And we talk about racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, speciesism. And I think all of those things are related. I think they're all wrong. I have actually, one of the things that, in 1989, PETA, and I was involved with PETA at the time, PETA came out with the I'd rather go naked than wear fur thing. And I objected to that. I was the only person who was in sort of the little inner circle there who objected to it. And I remember I said to Ingrid, as long as we're treating women like meat, we will continue to treat animals like meat. This is a bad idea. We ought not to do it. At the time, I went to Feminists for Animal Rights, which was a new group, and I asked them to support me. They would not, because Ingrid was a woman, and they would not take a position. They didn't take a position against that until 1994 about. I do agree that I think that all forms of discrimination are related. I think the relationship between speciesism and sexism is particularly similar. Because, for example, in pornography, I was having this discussion with somebody earlier today. When we consume pornography, we are not the personhood of the object of our sexual energy or whatever is no longer a person. We consume body parts. And sort of, there's really no difference between consuming, you consume pornography, there's no longer a person there. You're consuming body parts. In the same way that when you go to the store, you buy the chicken, there's no animal there anymore. It's a body part in a styrofoam, thing with plastic over it. And I think the relationships between sexism and speciesism are really on point. And I spent a lot of time in the course talking about that. We have them read like Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin. When a lot of people don't have students reading that stuff anymore because they think it's too radical or thing. And I think Andrea Dworkin was totally on point in a lot of ways. So was Catherine McKinnon. I do think those things those relationships are important. The bottom line is we otherize. And it's something that we white guys do really well and have been doing for a long time. is otherizing people of color. We need to stop otherizing women. We need to stop otherizing gay people, trans people. We need to stop otherizing disabled people. We need to stop otherizing non-human animals. We need to just stop that otherization. The whole idea of drawing lines, gotta stop. It's something that we do, and it's violence. As far as I'm concerned, it's himsa, it's violence, it ought to stop. Okay, you, yes, sir, what's your name?
Mark.
Mark.
I appreciate your focus on grassroots movement. If there was going to be an organisation that was going to seek to change the paradigm, what would be the most effective thing that organisation could do?
Never have a donate button anywhere. I mean, look, I think once you turn these things into businesses, you want to keep your donor pool big. And so you keep your donor pool big by basically not taking any hard lines. So you basically say, oh, well, you want to eat less meat, God bless you, come in. And, you want to eat, you want to eat the same amount of meat, but you don't want to eat kangaroo, fine, come on in. And, basically this idea that we want to keep our donor pool as broad as possible. I understand as a practical matter why people want to do that. It costs a lot of money to run these organizations. But I think once you're starting to take a salary, I always tell people when they say, I want my career to be in animal stuff. And I always say to them, look, get a job and do something. Don't, once you're dependent on the animal movement for your livelihood, you now have a set of perverse incentives that will drive you to do things which are not productive. And so, but I do think this has got to be a grassroots movement. If there's going to be any sort of organization, actually, Tom Reagan and I, in 1995, for a brief period of time, and I mean like literally brief, it was about it had a lifespan of about 2 months. We started something where we were going to get a group of and nobody was going to take a salary, and it was going to be, people were going to help generate literature, which would then be distributed to people who wanted to do grassroots organizing. So we would create literature, and so that people could just, could distribute literature and go out and do advocacy. That didn't last very long because, for a variety of reasons. But we don't, look, with the internet now, the internet has really changed things. As much as I don't like it, in a lot of ways I don't. But the internet has changed things dramatically in that it's cut down, first of all, like I've got this abolitionist approach Facebook page. It's got it hasn't been going all that long. We've got like 72,000 people on it. And I've got a great staff of moderators, including some people who are here. And they're all, everyone's a volunteer. We all and we've got this web page, theabolitionistapproach.com. We've got howdoigovegan.com. No one's making any money off of this. And, we're creating literature, and now you don't have to print it and say, people can print it themselves now. So there's no need really even for a central organization that's going to produce literature. We can do this stuff. There's something called the International Vegan Association that was started by a friend of mine named Dave Langlois, who's a really, really talented fellow. He's not taking a salary. He's an ethicist, and he just does. We all do this in our quote spare time. And we're producing this stuff. And the IVA, International Vegan Association, has got some great literature, and you download it, and I even think Dave will send. I think Dave will subsidize. I subsidize. If somebody writes to me and says, I don't have money for I can't print out the brochure. They're just 2 colors, but some people don't have the resources. If somebody writes to me and says, I can't afford it, I print the damn things out and I send it to them. And it's whatever it costs me. It's like like a few fewer movies that I go and see or something, but that's worth it. And so. There's all sorts of things that we could be doing. We don't need organizations. The day of the organization is over with. These charities are not going to. Charities have perverse incentives. They want to keep the donor pool large, so they moderate their position. We've got to have a very clear position, and it's got to be a radical position. And I really mean radical in the sense. Radical means getting to the roots. Okay? And what we need to do is to get to the root of exploitation. We don't get to the root of exploitation by perpetuating happy exploitation or by being anything but 100% clear. And so I think, and I understand what a lot of people, I understand that, I'm sure that, I don't know what Tony's going to say when we talk in a little while, but I'm sure that Tony shares the view that, we can use these campaigns to sort of piggyback. But the problem is, while we're creating these campaigns are perpetuating exploitation. Maybe they can be used in some useful way, but whatever useful way they can be used in, we don't know what those useful ways are. But we do know that the campaigns themselves are continuing to perpetuate exploitation and perpetuating the idea that foie gras is worse than steak or fur is worse than wool. Yes, what's your name?
Dawn.
Dawn.
There are, from my point of view, that when you're doing grassroots, there are some single issues that don't have to be promoting non-vegan. Vivisection doesn't actually promote exploitation of something else, neither does, stabbing against foxes, neither does, lots of individual campaigns, but it can be a way that you actually get individuals to stop and talk to them. I'm not suggesting that you ever promote anything other than vegan to anybody once you're talking to them, but you can talk to people and they can stop because they're interested in wildlife or because they're interested in...
Yeah, but if what you're doing is getting them to stop, let's talk about the Badger campaign for a second, because I thought the Badger campaign was problematic in all sorts of ways. First of all, one of the main powers in that was the RSPCA. I think if you've ever got anything, if you're involved in a campaign that the RSPCA, here's a rule for you to live by. If you're ever involved in a campaign that the RSPCA has anything to do with, get the hell out fast, okay? Because the RSPCA is a troubled and troubling organization in a number of different ways. But if you look at the Badger campaign, were there vegans who were involved in that? And the answer is, yeah, I'm sure there were. But that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's a coalition that involved people who were not vegan. I mean, Brian May, as far as I know, is not a vegan. A lot of people weren't vegan, and there was a lot of stuff there about how, the reason why it was bad was because it was scientifically unsound. I don't care whether it's scientifically sound or unsound. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't, that's not the point. There were issues about how, there were issues about dairy cows. I don't remember. I'm trying to think about what I saw. I saw something about that it would be better for dairy farmers to do something else. I don't remember what it was, but it was like they were saying dairy farmers would be better off doing something other than killing the badgers, as if
vaccinating the cows.
Yes, right. Vaccination of the cows. That this was, Brian May was busy talking about vaccination of cows. So I think that was a problematic campaign to be involved with. Does it give you an opportunity to talk to people? The answer is yes. But you know what? Talking to people about veganism, this may surprise you, but it is not nearly as difficult to talk to people about veganism as you might think. Because everybody agrees with the idea that it's wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering on animals, and what you need to do is to get them to see that their commitment to that basic moral principle commits them to veganism, and it does, without doubt. I have no problem. I have no problem engaging people. It happens all the time. Like I'll be at the supermarket. I've got my, I eat a lot of raw stuff, so I have 6 heads of kale in the cart. And somebody, as a matter of fact, right before I came over to Britain, I had gone shopping and I'd gotten some, I had a lot of vegetables in the cart. And a woman in back of me says, "You eat healthy?" And I said, "Well, I'm a vegan." And she said, "You are." She said, "How do you get your protein?" I get the question. Where do you get your protein? And so I had a discussion with her about protein, and we ended up, and then I had to put my stuff on the belt, and then we continued talking outside in the parking lot for like 20 minutes, and I gave her I said, "If you have questions," I said, you got to think about going vegan. We got into a discussion about how she had breast cancer in her family. I said, "You shouldn't be eating dairy. Dairy, all hormonally sensitive cancers, are very responsive to dairy. You shouldn't be eating dairy." But there are, and she was telling me how she loves animals. I said, "You love animals. You shouldn't be eating them." And literally right before I got on the plane, I saw she had emailed me to ask me questions. You can engage people. This is not difficult. As a matter of fact, it's difficult to not get engaged with people.
You could almost say that was single issue because the way in was actually health. Just like I've had a similar conversation when in a you know, in a sewing shop and it starts off with mother of pearl, but we end up talking vegan.
But a single issue campaign is a campaign where you target something. You target it's usually a product, not always, but it's usually a product that you target as being worse than other products. And so you're saying we ought to stop consuming that product, and because it is not linked with an explicit vegan message, then the message that gets conveyed is consuming the other products is morally better and morally acceptable. That's what I mean by a single issue campaign. The examples I've given have all been those sorts of things. The idea that you start talking about mother of pearl. Well, vivisection I find vivisection really interesting. In that, I was debating a vivisector at the university last year. A guy came from UCLA, and we were debating. And I started off by saying, we had reserved a room that was supposed to hold like 100 people. We had ended up having like 300 people. I mean, really, it was packed. And so I started off by asking the group. I said, "How many of y'all are vegans?" And about 6 hands went up. And I said, "This is going to be a real weird night," because I said, think about it for a second. I said, you all eat animal products, which you don't need to eat. You eat them because you like the taste or whatever, and you all eat this stuff. And you're all getting sick from eating it. So we're going to have a debate about whether or not, you all think it's fine to eat animals for no good reason other than palate pleasure. We're going to have a debate about whether it's all right for him to use animals in experiments to find cures for the illnesses that you're giving yourself by eating animals in the first place. I said, this is going to be a very weird night. And we ended up talking about veganism. Because it's interesting, historically, the anti-vivisection movement, my theory on the anti-vivisection movement is that it allows us to sort of express our concern about animals without having to change our lives. Because people can be opposed. Vivisection is something that most of us don't do. How many people even know a vivisector? I know lots of them because I've been in the university for 30 years, but how many people even know a vivisector? Okay, so a couple of people. We don't know them, we don't do it, we don't know people who do it. It's a very sort of removed practice. But people will express concerns about vivisection while they're eating their steaks. There's something very weird about it, and particularly since the use of animals in experiments. I think it's voodoo science, but it's at least not as transparently frivolous as our use of animals for food or our use of animals for clothing, which is really transparently frivolous. So there's something very odd about it when we're focusing on a use of animals that arguably has some I don't believe it is, but it has some plausible justification where the main use of animals, and the number of animals we use in vivisection is huge, but it's a tiny, tiny fraction relative to the number of animals we eat, that we focus on that practice strikes me as being a very sort of weird thing. I believe historically the reason why the animal movement focused on vivisection was it allowed people to continue to not be vegans while they expressed their outrage over animal exploitation. And and over the years, I've known a lot of quote animal people who were in the 80s. We focused a lot on vivisection, a lot, and a lot of the people who were involved in fighting vivisection were not vegans. And so I think that it allows people to express their, and look, I don't think we're going to get rid. We're not going to get rid of vivisection as long as we're eating them and we're supporting their exploitation for completely nonsense reasons of palate pleasure. Why does anybody think we're going to get rid of it if because a lot of people think it's going to find a cure for cancer, or it's going to find a cure for heart disease or some other nonsense, or erectile dysfunction, but as long as people think that, why are people going to oppose vivisection if they're not vegan? It's very weird. But I think, look, I know the bottom line is, as long as we're all eating, Because that's our relationship with animals. I mean, that's our main, other than, if you put aside our relationship with our dogs and our cats, our main relationship to animals is when we stick them in our mouths. And we do it all the time. And our cultures are sort of, it's like, we all think about, wonderful holidays that we had with our families and our grandparents, and people who are now dead and stuff like that. And they all revolve around, dead animals on the table and animal products all over the place. And it's, as long as that's something that we hold on to and that we hold as sacred in some way, nothing's ever going to change. We need to see that. So I'm not saying that we ought to see Grandma as a neo-Nazi or something because she made roasts for us. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we need to sort of get away completely from the idea that animals are things that we eat. As a matter of fact, you know what? And I'm not saying you shouldn't eat them, and I'm not saying there's anything morally wrong with them, but I don't even eat these fake meat things, like the fake ham and turkey. I don't eat tofurkey and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything particularly morally wrong with it. I don't do it because my view is I want to get away from the whole idea that I'm deprived if I don't have something that is like meat. And that I need meat. I need something that's meat-like to feel that I'm eating. I think we need to get away from that. We need to get away. But I'm not saying. And again, I don't want to get hate mail over this. Y'all want to eat tofurkey. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat. I'm just saying we need to get away from the symbolism of animals as food in every way that we can. Let me get somebody who has it. Yes, you. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Diana.
Diana?
Diana. Yes. When I talk to people a lot online, especially, people tend to come to me and say, not everyone in the world can go vegan. And so, in a way, to discredit, the whole point of going vegan.
What do you mean not everyone?
Well, what they mean is that some communities either don't have access to the crops that allow them to have the nutrition, or that some minorities are so oppressed that they don't have the emotional availability to care for animals.
I find that, look, I teach in Newark, which is like, have you ever been in Newark, New Jersey? No. My recommendation is don't come unless you're armed. It's very, very dangerous. There's a lot of poor people. In America, we do poverty better than any place else in the world. And so, and I teach in a university with a lot of young people who come from that community. The idea that people who are exploited can't understand exploitation is nonsense. They understand it just fine. There are ways of explaining it to them that are problematic, that can be inflammatory and not helpful. But the idea that people can't understand this is wrong. Number one. Number two, the idea that some communities, what I hear all the time is, well, it's elitist to be a vegan. What nonsense! It's much. Does it cost more? Does it cost more money to be a vegan? Absolutely not. If you're going to go to Whole Foods and you're going to buy Boca burgers and tofurkey and all this stuff, that stuff, which is nutritionally useless and has lots of salt, is expensive. But eating a diet of fruits, vegetables, seeds, seeds, grains, etc., is always cheaper. And generally, the reason why some communities don't have those products to eat is because they're being grown so they can be fed to animals, so that people in Western countries can consume those animal products. So, the idea that we can't all be vegan is an idea that we need to reject. It's nonsense. We can all be vegan. If the world were vegan, we'd actually have fewer acres of land under cultivation. We could feed the world. 780 million people could live from the plant products that we grow in the United States alone, that we feed to cows, pigs, chicken, and sheep. 780 million. We could end world starvation. We could feed the world if we were all vegan. I think we got time for one or two more questions. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Stuart.
Stuart.
What do you say to the person who says they don't care?
You go on to the next person, Stuart. Look, the reality is there are people who just don't give a shit. Let's just be honest. There are people who don't care. And there's really, look, I really, I pride myself in having lots of logical arguments. Logic cannot persuade somebody to care morally if that person doesn't care. You need to care. If you care, I can get you to the point where you will see veganism as your only option. It's your only way out. But if you don't care, there's not a whole lot I can do. So if somebody says, I don't care, now sometimes you'll get that from people, and sometimes it means something else. Sometimes, guys will say, oh, I don't care, because that's what guys are supposed to say, because compassion is just not a male thing. And caring about morality is, for a lot of men, a threat. And so I think that, if somebody really doesn't care, then there's nothing you can do. But you know what? The good thing, that's bad, Stuart, but the good thing is there's a zillion people who do care. And I look at everybody I meet, I'm not kidding you, this is the way I think. Every human being I meet, I see as a potential vegan. And I look at every person I meet as a challenge. This person has the spark of morality within them. I've got to ignite it. That's what I should be doing. If I find out that they're in fact dead, that there ain't no spark, I move on to the next person. And I have to tell you, have I encountered people in the 30 plus years that I have been engaged in this fun project? The answer is, yeah, I have met some people who don't care. I haven't met a whole lot of them. I've met some. But most people do care. And our goal, our object, our responsibility, our obligation is to educate those people and explain to them why their caring has to translate into certain concrete changes in their lives. The nice thing about veganism is it's one thing we can all do. We don't need expensive campaigns. We don't need big organizations. This is something people can do right now. And there's this group, Direct Action Everywhere or something. And I talked with this guy on Bob Linden's show a couple months ago, and he was saying, well, veganism is harmful because it's not activist. And I said, sorry, Charlie. In my judgment, being a vegan is the most important activist thing you can do for non-human animals. I mean, I hope it's not the only thing you do. I hope you go vegan and then you educate other people about veganism. But the idea that going vegan is some sort of useless act, or sort of that's nonsense. It is the most important thing you can do to help non-human animals is to go vegan. And I hope once you do go vegan, you will spend your time and your energy. And it's not, you don't have to, some people some people don't like interacting with large groups of other people. Okay, fine, so don't do that. Some people are not really comfortable in certain social situations. Fine, but everybody's got friends, everybody's got family. You've got family, you got friends, you got lovers, you got partners, whatever. Talk to everybody you can. Never, ever, ever, ever let an opportunity go by, where you don't talk about this. I mean, yes, I do this in large groups, but I do it every day with every human being. When I made the plane reservation, when I made the damn plane reservation with British Airways, I got some, she was very pleasant. And I said, I want a vegan meal. And I said, no, I don't want, and she said, yes. And I said, no, and I really mean this. I said, I don't want anything on that tray that's got any animal products. I don't want any creamer that's got casein in it. And she said, well, you're very strict about this. I said, no, I'm just a vegan. And she said, and we got into a discussion. And Anna was in the other room and she was laughing. And she said, you're the only person who can spend 40 minutes on the phone with British Airways talking to this woman about veganism. And the answer is, I will talk about it with anybody who doesn't walk away. We'll take one more. You, sir.
Hi, Paul. One of the most divisive arguments I see within vegan communities is that of the subject of palm oil. And
What?
palm oil.
Palm oil.
And people saying that you can't be vegan if you consume palm oil, which I don't agree with. And I'd like to hear, I've seen you write about it, but it would be great to hear your view on that here.
I should have actually mentioned when I said the things I get hate mail about. I forgot about palm oil. Yes, palm oil. Palm oil is vegan. It harms orangutans, or at least some of it does. But this is where I really am attracted to the philosophy of the Jain community. Are you familiar with Jains? Okay. And one of the reasons why I like the idea of Jainism, or I like what I've learned in Jainism, is that it teaches us that all of our actions, everything that we do, has adverse consequences. So every time we consume anything, we're harming somebody, human, it's like, how many people are killed in the petroleum industry? We use oil, we use gasoline, we use oil products. People are harmed in the petroleum. Everything, every product we consume involves some harm, which is one of the reasons why we need to consume. All of us need to consume a lot less. And I actually am very conflicted. When Tim invited me to come, I was happy. I wanted to be here with y'all, and I thought it was important because VegFest has been really welfareist until recently. The abolitionist message has not been here. And so when Tim said, I really want you to come, but I have to tell you, flying on an airplane creates issues for me because it has environmental consequences. I would much rather, frankly, I would prefer to do these things by Skype. I actually do quite a few of these things by Skype. I lecture all over the world by Skype. But I think we all ought to consume as little as possible. Every time you're going to buy something, you need to ask yourself, do I really need that? And 90% of the time you're going to say no. You're just buying crap. And we're a materialistic culture. We are really materialistic. We associate the value of human. We associate inherent value with material objects, which is dangerous. It is deadly. It's deadly. And so I think whatever oil you consume, whether it's olive oil or soy oil or corn oil or whatever the hell oil it is, animals get killed in the process. The fact is, we fetishize orangutans because.
What about the subject of being endangered? Does that?
No, I don't. Who endangered? We can't. That's not. As far as I'm concerned, endangered animals have no greater moral value. The last elephant, as far as I am concerned, has no greater moral value than one of the 80 zillion chickens that we kill. The idea, and see, I think that's why I said one of the points of the abolitionist approach is that all that matters is sentience, nothing else matters. So the idea that elephants matter, because they're endangered, or Cecil the lion matters because he's got a name and he's endangered or whatever. And I think this is all the wrong way to think about these things. I think as far as palm oil is concerned, do I care about the orangutans that are harmed? Yeah, I do. But I also care about all the other animals that are harmed, in all other, production of all other foods, which is why we ought to consume as little as possible. We all need to be eating less. We all need to be buying less crap. We all need to be participating in materialism much less than we do. And so I think that's a general. We actually have a section about this in the book that Anna and I have done about the abolitionist approach. We actually have a section about we need to be thinking about nonviolence in a much broader way. And we need to start realizing that all of our actions have consequences, negative consequences for other beings, human and not. And we need to be mindful of that, and we need to be taking actions to minimize that. But one of the most important things we can do right now, you don't need anything other than your will, is you stop eating them, wearing them, using them. And and I really mean this, and I would like to challenge everybody in this room. We got a good number of people in this room. Fine. Everybody, just make as your goal, by October, what the hell's the date? October 11th, 2016, convince one other person to go vegan. If we all did that, 10 years, we've got a vegan Britain. And we can do this. See, the problem is we are disempowered. we believe we can't do anything anymore. That, you know, and you know, to a large extent, we've allowed that to happen. You know, but that's the reality. We can do this, but only we can do it. No one's going to do it for you. And if you care about animals, then what you owe to them is to put your talent, your energy, your effort, you know, into creative, nonviolent, vegan advocacy. Because the reality is, once the light goes on, once they see that veganism is a moral imperative, their whole life changes. You don't have to talk to them anymore about wool. You don't have to talk about leather. Once they embrace the idea that it's morally wrong to stick the stuff in your mouth, which is the most intimate relationship we have with non-human animals, okay? Once they see that, everything changes. They don't go to SeaWorld anymore. They don't go fox hunting. You know, they don't, you know, they're not supporting badger hunting. They're all of the stuff, all of the nonsense that we make the subject of these single issue campaigns. All of these things will stop if people embrace a vegan ethic. And until they embrace a vegan ethic, nothing's going to change. Thank you very much.